The way you learn is by identifying a problem and seeing if you can resolve it. In the for-profit world, everybody's fighting to learn to try to fix things, right? In the nonprofit world, there are so many friggin' problems there. You have your pick of the litter. So I'm working with formerly homeless guys and gals. I'm learning all the same thing that a traditional bakery would learn, but I'm also learning about.
All right, we'd like to welcome everyone to this edition of the OpenEd podcast. I'm Matt Bowman, founder of OpenEd, and I'm pleased to be joined with my good friend, Matt Barnes. Sometimes they call us the Double Matt B's. So we're excited to be able to talk about entrepreneurship, one of our favorite shared topics, especially youth entrepreneurship. And so that will be the focus of today's conversation, and some tips and ideas for those that have still not submitted their application, what we look for as judges and what we want to see from the applicants' videos when they submit for our competition. So we're excited to announce every year we've been doing this $5,000 cash prize pool for our applicants around the world to show us what you've learned from entrepreneurship. So Matt, tell us more about that. How did this get started in your view of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it started by you and I having some conversations online about what kids actually need to be successful in the 21st century. And, I tell the story all the time about how I was forced to take calculus in high school. And gosh, I wish I could go back and have learned about practical things like how to sell, how to fail, right? How to contact people to ask what products or services they might want. These are the things that are actually matter. And so when we had those conversations, I think it was your idea to say, well, we need to share this. And so that's what kind of launched this idea. And so far, I've been so impressed by the quality of young people and their ability to think and solve problems and think as an entrepreneur would. So that's kind of how this all started.
Yeah, and I'll add, it's funny. I was, we were on LinkedIn a few years ago. That's where some of the conversations were happening.
Right.
And I had been following you for a while because your title in LinkedIn was Parent Whisperer. And so I started saying, what is this guy talking about? And what is he trying to tell parents? And it was funny. I told myself, I'm going to follow him until there's something I disagree with what he says. And then I'll challenge him and then we can debate, and post after post after post, I agreed with everything. I was like, this Matt Barnes dude gets it. He is speaking the language that parents need to hear. And so that's when I reached out. I kept looking for something I disagreed with and I couldn't find it. And so I thought, let's collaborate. Let's join forces. Tell us how you came up with Parent Whisperer as a job title for LinkedIn.
Yeah, I changed that LinkedIn title. It seems like every month it seems, but at the time, for me, again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm frustrated by what I see. I've been working in education for 25 years. I've been on board of 10 schools, including 2 universities, one a selective university, all the way down to Head Start. I've been on a board of a Head Start system, and I'm just frustrated. And so as I began to try to rail against the system to improve and to get ready for this ridiculously confusing and complicated 21st century, I began to see that the system just doesn't want to change. And so I began wanting to talk directly to parents because they have the most investment in the child's long-term future, right? If the child is struggling at age 35, the school doesn't really have any investment in that. It's the parent that's going to pay that price, that's going to suffer and feel sad and wonder if they did things wrong. And so I wanted to talk to parents directly to say, listen, you got to prepare your kids differently. And the way to do that, I believe, and I'm looking for someone to convince me otherwise, the way to do that is to teach a young person how to lead themselves, how to initiate, how to solve problems that they see out there, rather than wait for somebody to tell them what to do and how to solve it and when to do it. So as a parent whisperer, I've been working with parents for 15 years now, and all of it is really around how do you get a parent to think about education differently education in a way that's not school. So right now, I don't even know what
Yeah.
my LinkedIn profile says, but that spirit and that heart is still there. So
So share some of the reactions parents would have when you would talk about the mindset difference, that you need to think differently. And, here at OpenEd, we use the term open education is kind of the marriage of homeschooling, district schooling, unschooling, micro schooling, private schooling. Like, all those definitions are starting to meld together.
yep.
And we just want open education, help families access the education that will help their child the best. But it's hard. Parents aren't used to thinking about an open education.
Exactly.
What kind of reactions were you getting as you started chatting with parents about that?
Yeah, open ed is exactly the right framing, by the way. What most parents, the reaction is fear. And that fear
Yeah.
is, am I going to injure my child by doing something that I look to my left, kids to my left and families to my right, and I don't see anybody doing anything different than just following the 50-year-old, 150-year-old plan of getting your kid from kindergarten to college. And so that fear really is the driver. And I felt it myself when my kids started to make adjustments. And I'm not sure if we'll talk about this a little bit later, Matt, but what I started to realize is that um, in a time when normal is broken, and nobody can argue that the normal model of education is fine. Nobody can argue that. Normal is broken. And in a time when normal is broken, then weird actually wins. And so what I try to tell
I like
parents is
that.
like, don't be afraid of looking at something that's different. Be afraid of normal, because when you got this much change going on this rapidly, and you're following the same process that my grandparents followed in education, that's when you should be really frightened. So
A great point.
eventually parents would start to get there, but it really required some kind of coaching and support. And again, that's the kind of the service I provide for free, by the way.
Yeah. And what do we need to do to help? Because I've seen it all the time. Just, I'm afraid I'm going to do something that's going to hurt my child for life. People won't judge me if I just drop them off at a district school,
Correct.
but they'll judge me harshly if I do something different. And that's started to change over the past couple of years, where the societal acceptance of, actually, I should do something different. To your point, the normal is what's more scary.
Yep.
And so we're starting to see that as well. And I think it's so hard, though, to family gatherings, Thanksgiving, holidays, the family critiques the parent. We really just say, you've got to come up with your answers, stand firm, do what's best for your kid. But people are going to try to drag you back down into the pot. So
absolutely. And so two stories that I'll share. The first is that businesses are recognizing that there's a problem as well. And so businesses are beginning to really look at young people, not in what what antiquated credential they have, whether it's a degree or a high school diploma. They're saying, what can you do? And how do I know that if you come into this job, you can actually lead? Be an entrepreneur is the term that some use. Come into my job and see a problem and go, you know what? I'm going to fix that problem without anybody telling me about it or telling me to fix it. That's what companies are looking for. So that's the first piece. And again, a company can't tell how you're going to operate based on your school or educational or school experience. Generally speaking, they can tell that you're going to follow rules pretty well, but not that you're going to see a problem and resolve it without anyone telling you, right? First thing. Second thing is, we all do experiments on our kids, right? Let's just be honest, right? I know you got several kids. Each one is an experiment in and of itself. And so every kid is different. So the idea of an open ed is that some kids need to have different, experiences, right? And so I have one kid who was a valedictorian at his public high school, another kid who left school at age 14 and a half, and has built her own education. My valedictorian is still in college. My the second one that left school early is 20 and has been working 2 years in a marketing job in success. She's been promoted 3 times in two
Yeah.
years. And so she doesn't have a diploma or a degree, but she's doing great. My son hasn't even entered the world yet, and he's 2 years older. So these are the things that are possible for families to realize that, wait a second, a kid can get a job in marketing and advance without a diploma or a degree. How is that possible? It's becoming more normal, folks. And again, in 20
It is.
years, that's going to be with programs like OpenEd, that's going to become much more of the normal experience.
Yeah, the signal is no longer that here's my GPA and credits.
That's right.
It's here's what I can do. Here's a demonstrated example of my skill set. So you have 3 kids. So where's the third going to break the tie?
The third one's kind of in between, right? So she's taking some courses at the local community college, but she's also pursuing flight. So she's an aspiring pilot,
Nice.
and yeah, and so she's on that track, and is really loving it. She's fulfilled in the work that she's doing, and because she's fulfilled and loving it, she accelerates and learns so much faster than somebody who's just doing it because they're told. It's that's the change.
Yeah, and I just a personal side note, I had a chance to have lunch with Matt and his daughters, his family there in Houston, and in the backyard with his baked bread. So actually, let's do a little a story on your bakery. So
Yes.
that sandwich and bread was absolutely delicious, Matt. So tell us how you got into helping adults through entrepreneurship through a neighborhood bakery.
Yeah. So I had a relationship with a friend from church who runs a group home for formerly homeless men and women, and I knew of a program out of Los Angeles called Homeboy Bakery, where they taught former gang members and prisoners, ex-prisoners, how to bake bread as a way to give them purpose and to transition them from a life of illegality to a life of legal work and training and team membership, etc. And as I got to know some of these formerly homeless guys and gals, I started realizing they are the ultimate definition of a failure of education, right? They came through an entire system without having any of the skills of how do I solve problems? How do I anticipate need? How do I create value? They had none of that. And so I'm watching these guys and I'm like, well, I wonder if I could learn enough how to bake and offer this as a way for those guys and gals to begin moving from this place of, panhandling and that kind of life to a life where they're actually producing something that people want. And so I taught myself how to bake. I did an apprenticeship, a micro apprenticeship up in Minneapolis, and then came down and began to teach them how to bake. And so far, it's been extremely difficult because the skills they learned or the skills they didn't learn, the skills of avoiding failure, which is what you learn in school, the skills of working as a team member as opposed to as an individual. They're very good at operating as an individual, not very good at operating as a team. Again, very consistent with a typical school education. And then they're really uncomfortable in the idea of sales, like talking to someone about talking to a potential customer or just someone they know who is a peer who they haven't met. These are just skills that they lacked. And so this year of working in this has been transformative for me to realize all the things that a young person really needs to learn and what the risk if they don't learn those things. It's hugely important. And so we're entering year 2, and I tell you, it's been hard, but it's an entrepreneurial endeavor. We are growing. We're just growing a lot slower than I would want. But I still remain excited about the possibility of these guys learning things that they haven't learned before. And so far they are learning it. It's just so sad that it's taken sometimes 20, 30, 40 years before they get introduced to these concepts.
Yeah, no, I applaud what you're doing, Matt. You're a shining star as an example of putting your heart right there at the front line to say, I see a opportunity that my skill sets have helped me with. What can I do to help the world. So kudos.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. That's a good segue to, rather than wait 30 or 40 years, what can we do with youth? What is it about entrepreneurship that teaches this? What I say is entrepreneurship is the most interdisciplinary curriculum ever invented. I have yet to find something that integrates so many different skill sets into one joint pursuit than entrepreneurship.
Well said.
You need tech, you need writing, you need communication, you need sales, you need finance, you need details, you need customer service, like
Rapid
all
learning.
that. You need
Rapid
to learn
learning.
quickly. It's not, no one's going to tell you how to do it. You just have to go figure it out. Like there's no textbook to launch this business, right? Entrepreneurship requires creativity, resilience, ability to overcome your failure, all those things. So
yes,
what is it that you've seen youth do in entrepreneurship that demonstrates all those skills that parents want, adults want, businesses want? Like what are those things people are learning through entrepreneurship that you've seen?
Yes, I think I would say three things. The first is how to really learn. If you think about any problem, you're not the first person to struggle with that problem. And so some of the youth entrepreneurs that we've seen have got on the phone and called a professor at a university and said, here's the problem I'm working on. Can you give me 10 minutes of your time or 20 minutes of your time? Others have, I'm thinking about, I can't remember his name, but kid in Ohio. Anyway, he went online and started finding other people who did pressure washing to find out what they did. Nolan, right. What they did, how they built their business. Could he get coached by somebody that's already in the business? Like that is true learning because it is entirely relevant and entirely time sensitive to the place you're in. So that's the first thing. I feel like they know and learned how to learn. The second was they learned how to deal with money, Matt. Like we deal with money every single minute of every day, but nobody talks about it, right? Yeah. And so these entrepreneur kids are starting to go, wait a second. So if I spend this dollar, I need to make sure I get it back. And what if I don't get it back? Well, maybe I need to spend differently, right? I need to think as an investor as opposed to as a spender, right? These are some of the most fundamental skills. And again, good luck finding that in a traditional school. And the third thing I think is, you mentioned it, Matt, is really about failure. Life is just a series. I don't want to be morbid here, but life is a series of failures, right? You fail and you fail and you fail, and then you figure it out, and then you move on. And then the next thing you do, you fail and fail, and you figure it out, and you move on. If anybody thinks you're going to get through this life without having multiple failures, you are just whack, right? So yeah. These youth have shown us, and those are actually some of the most exciting applicants, the ones who've said, I've tried this and I failed, and I did this and I lost money, and I did this but I started to understand things. So I changed my process, and here's where I am now. And so that idea of learning and losing and failing, and then moving up to success or moving towards success, that's all key. We do not care if your company is profitable, it has a chance of, growing. We care that you are learning through this experience. And those three things I just mentioned to me are some of the most important that I've seen. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Matt.
Well, thank you. I need to put a little pin on that. Those are the tips, applicants. If you want your video, your application to shine, be real. Share how each of those aspects have affected your learning journey as an entrepreneur. And again, I'll just add, we don't care about the profitability, the size, the addressable market, the return on investment. Those aren't those are other competitions. Go apply to Shark Tank or whatever you want for those. We're here to find entrepreneurs who can articulate what skills and knowledge they've learned through entrepreneurship. So tell us those things. Tell us what you've learned and then demonstrate that you are learning by saying, this worked, this didn't work. I failed here, I changed it, and this happened. Like, those are the types of stories we want to hear from our young entrepreneur applicants. And I'll give a quick example. We received an applicant just the other day, and the video was it sounded like a Shark Tank pitch. It was just scripted. It was unfeeling, but it was, said all these right things that you might think in a pitch. And I replied to the applicant and I said, that was fine. Can you share just an unscripted 30-second video of yourself just talking about what it is that inspired you to be an entrepreneur and what it is you're learning about that? Like, who are you as a human? He sent that back later that day, and it was awesome. It was wonderful. So that's another tip, is just be authentically you, be real. Just tell us what it is you're learning, not learning, what you're struggling with in your business. Like, demonstrate that learning is occurring, not just, hey, I've sold 10 widgets for a profitable margin and I can sell 1,000 more if I do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Like, want to learn hear what you're learning about. So
Huge.
Super excited. So those are all tips to the viewers of this, parents, if you're listening. Anyone on 18 years and younger, anywhere on the planet, can apply to our Young Entrepreneurship Award Program, yea.education, and submit your story of why it is what you learned as an entrepreneur. So super excited about that.
Agreed.
Tell us what's next, Matt. What, besides your bakery and what, the learning journey there, what are some of the things you see out there on your horizon?
Oh, you mean for me or for, more generally?
Both.
Okay. Well, for me, one of the things about being an entrepreneur is, this, Matt, is you got to fail. I think you said this. You got to fail or expect to fail 9 times or something like that before you get a win. And, I went into this baking deal realizing that I've got a bunch of winds blowing against me. So, but I'm open to the possibility that this thing will not work. So I'm going to give it another year. I've invested quite a bit of money, but this is also a social mission. It's a social entrepreneurial activity. But aside from that, I've got, as you probably can figure out, I've got a few other projects that I'm excited about. Youth Entrepreneur Award is always one of them that gets me excited and gets me thinking again about the power of entrepreneurship. But the thing I would want to share more is for parents. Parents, I really want you to hear what we've shared today. It doesn't mean that your child necessarily needs to leave the traditional school, but I would hope that you hear what we're talking about and start to bring some questions to mind about what your child is really going to need. Again, I'm not working for OpenEd. I have no relationship other than knowing Matt, but what they actually need is a way for them to explore far greater horizons than a typical school often can. And so, again, I'm not getting paid by OpenEd, but I do want to help parents realize that programs like this, and there's a bunch out there, create opportunities for your child to 10 years from now or 5 years from now to be able to look an employer in the eye and say, I've done these things and I can do them in your shop, right?
Yeah.
Completely different conversation. And here's a lesson I learned from my daughter, the one that started working at 18 and has been, just doing really well. She said, Matt, if she can convince an employer that she can bring more value to that organization than they are going to pay her, then she realizes that she has a potential job. And the larger the gap between the value that she can bring to that employer and her pay, the more opportunities will be for her. And so it's about, for her, building the skills so she can always make that claim to any employer at any time, hire me and I'm going to bring such value to you, you're going to be thrilled. That is the nature of,
I love that.
That's the nature of work in the 21st century. People care less and less about what credential you have. They care about what you can do to advance this company, advance this social activity or social entrepreneurial activity. And that is the future we're in right now. So please don't hesitate, parents, and encourage your children in that direction.
Yeah, I love that. Uh, one of the things you said reminded me of a topic we've talked about. Entrepreneurship doesn't just have to be for profit.
Correct.
Right? Entrepreneurship, the skills and learning, and we've had applicants, and we encourage applicants to view themselves as an entrepreneur if they're doing community-based, nonprofit type work where they're changing their neighborhood for the better, and they've organized a group to gather and clean up parks or streets or just make businesses in the local town better.
Right.
Talk to me about how social entrepreneurship and or simply community leadership applies to this world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And again, I'm doing it personally. So this is a place of personal importance to me. And Matt, I know your history and that it's not about just the money. It's about actually changing this world in a better way. So I think we're in great alignment here. So applicants, don't think of this as Shark Tank. Matt mentioned that a minute ago. Shark Tank only thinks about the bottom line. We think about, one, you're learning, and then two, is there something bigger than profit that's driving you, right? And profit is not bad necessarily. But I also want you to realize that if you really want to learn, the way you learn is by identifying a problem and seeing if you can resolve it, right? In the for-profit world, everybody's fighting to learn to try to fix things, right? In the nonprofit or the social world, there are so many friggin' problems there. You have your pick of the litter. So I'm working with formerly homeless guys and gals. I'm learning all the same thing that a traditional bakery would learn, but I'm also learning about how homelessness works, where it comes from, the system of homelessness, the systems of supports that are failing people. So I'm learning about, I would argue, way more than
like you're demonstrating lifelong learning better than anything could ever be written.
Hopefully. But I would argue that in the social sector, you're going to learn twice as much, maybe not twice, but you're going to learn a lot more than in the for-profit. That's fine. At some point you got to make a profit. And right now I'm in a position where that's not a huge driver for us, but don't hesitate to look in your neighborhood and go, man, there's a problem right there. I'm going to bring an entrepreneurial mind to that problem and see how I can resolve it.
Love it. You've also talked about impacted communities, particularly in the K-12 space. Who's been least served, or what are some of the communities that you feel like the traditional 100-year trap of K-12 has hurt our nation's youth the most?
Yeah.
Talk about that for a minute.
So yes, I mean, a minute or an hour. I mean, I can give you an hour if you want on this one. So, all right. There is a term called teaching to the middle. Have you heard this term, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay. So
teaching
to the middle means in every classroom and in every subject, there is a bell curve of kids' preparation and readiness for that concept that's going to be introduced that day. Some kids on the bell curve are going to be, it's going to be the first time they hear it. Maybe they're not ready for it. They haven't had the supporting learning. And then in that same classroom, someone who's already learned that. And so usually what happens is on that continuum, the people at either end suffer the most. So the kid who already knows, pick your subject, right?
They're bored. They've seen it 10 times already. They've talked about it. Yeah.
Then you're wasting that kid's time, right? The kids on the other end, you're going too fast. And this happens over and over again in every subject, in every space. So again,
just insert, I taught 6th grade, and the 10 to 14-year-old age group scientifically are the broadest age group on the planet. So you have people who are shaving and people who've never had a whisker, right?
That's right.
All and developmentally normal in a 6th grade classroom.
That's right.
So yes, I understand about those extremes.
And so I'm not trying to get too much in the weeds here, but just recognize that, again, I'm talking to parents now, recognize that the kids are not being served well. And so the beauty of entrepreneurship, though, is you can learn as fast as you want to learn in an
Mm.
entrepreneurial environment, right? So whether you are, a little slower in the uptick, no problem. You just slow your learning down until you're comfortable. And if you're really a rapid learner, then you just go. Both of them can be wonderfully successful in an entrepreneurial environment,
Yeah.
but not so in a traditional school environment. So again, think parents about your kid and how they're good at certain things and not good at others, but they're always being compared and, in some cases, uh, undermotivated because they already know it, or discouraged because they don't know it and they can't learn it fast enough. If you pull them out of that kind of mindset, they can learn without these artificial limits that are placed on them. Usually, they'll end up becoming way faster learners than anybody in a traditional space. So maybe that's the answer to that.
No, that's great. That reminds me of a conversation I've had with our children. We use the analogy of weightlifting.
Mm,
If I were to enter a weight room right now, I couldn't lift a 500-pound bar or whatever, right? I think you could. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're the 500-pound. I come in and I barely lift a 5-pound weight, right? So, uh, similar to entrepreneurship, you have to be able to recognize that practice lifting 5-pound weights begins your journey.
that's right.
And you can't expect someone who can lift 5 pounds to run a $10 million business tomorrow.
Right. That's right.
And so, but you need to lift the pound of, can you make $100 today, walking someone's dog? Can you then hire, then lift the 20-pound weight where you hire someone to help you expand your business, very small still. But we sometimes expect entrepreneurship to jump in and lift 500-pound weights when they haven't even lifted the 5-pound weights yet.
That's right.
So it's similar to that analogy. You can be successful doing a really hardcore workout with 20-pound weights, and it's at your speed, your rate, and you leave there stronger.
Bingo.
Right? But don't compare yourself to the weightlifter that's been there for 4 years and is lifting 500 pounds. Like, just don't do it.
That's right. That reminds me, Matt, of a book that I think I may have recommended this for some of the candidates in the past. The Millionaire Weekend, or Million Dollar Weekend, I think it's what it's called. A guy named Noah Kagan. And so all that book is about is building the musculature for entrepreneurship, doing things that force you into positions where you will fail. One of the really interesting concepts in the book is it suggests that you go into a coffee shop, and every time, or any place, and every time you buy something, you ask them for 10% discount. You're not going to get it 95% of the time, but it's forcing you into a place where you're asking something that you're likely not to get. That's exactly what an entrepreneur has to learn, how to ask.
That's a good lift.
Isn't it a great lesson? And you begin to become more muscular to ask questions and to not be injured when you fail. Beautiful.
Love it. Well, this has been awesome, Matt. I think let's start wrapping up. We've given some tips to apply into YEA, where we encourage everybody to do it. March 15th is the deadline every year. It opens January 15th. We then select finalists and semifinalists, and then go through a process. And it's a super rewarding experience for us to be able to see these youth around the world. People have asked, can they apply as teams? And the answer is yes. You can apply together with others. That's a great demonstration. So, back to the original point that entrepreneurship is the world's best interdisciplinary curriculum. It's because testing is solo and isolated, whereas entrepreneurship is with groups and open to solve problems around, you want to find experts. Testing, we tell kids, don't ask anyone for help. Right. It's like, that's the opposite of what success looks like. Like, you want to find the expert, ask them for help, and get it done. And so that's why I love entrepreneurship so much. So any parting words, Matt?
There are no losers in this. And I mean that. If you go through this process and you got selected, you're going to be a better entrepreneur. You're going to be a better thinker, a better problem solver. I hope a better human as a result of it. And so I encourage you to share it with a friend, to apply, and again, don't overthink this thing. See what happens.
Awesome. Matt, I wish you and your family well and your continued success with your great impact work. So thank you.
Thank you.